Thank you for doing this. When and where were you born?
I was born in Nairobi, Kenya, when 1992 June.
In
That's
June.
about,
In
yes, in June.
Does that mean you're a Gemini, the twins?
No, I'm a Cancer. I was born in the late June.
And do you identify at all with being sensitive and protective sometime, loving home? Do any of those Cancer traits, crab, apply to you?
Sensitive, yes. Yeah.
What words would you use to describe you for someone who doesn't know you? Like 3 words.
3 words. I'm optimistic. I'm patient. Yeah, and what else? What else? What else? Patient, optimistic, somehow organized. Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of work do you do besides environmental work to pay the bills?
To pay the bills, I currently work in a conservation organization, but I mostly do media stuff. Although I didn't do media when I was in university, but that's what I actually do.
Like what kind of
Yeah,
media stuff?
media communications, everything to do with communications. So social media, writing articles, such like things.
Hmm. Um,
Mm.
and how many languages do you speak?
Two, speaking two, Kiswahili and English. I can hear my mother tongue, that is Kikuyu. Yeah,
Jomo Kenyatta was a Kikuyu. I read his
yes,
book
it was.
and loved it, Facing Mount
Mm-hmm.
Kenya. Um,
Yeah,
so in university, what did you study? What was your emphasis?
I did wildlife management and conservation as an undergraduate degree for
Fabulous.
4 years. Yeah.
And what was there about your childhood and your family that
Mm.
encouraged you to go to university? Because some women don't have that kind of encouragement.
Yeah. Um, I'd say it was family support. I got a lot of family support to go to the university, and it was mostly based on, in my family, there are a lot of women before me who've gone to university. So it wasn't like a choice I have to make. It was like I've had women before me do it. So I can also do it, and it wasn't going to seem like there's going to be any roadblock. Either way, I still wanted to go to university, even from a child. Yeah,
It was just expected. Yeah.
it
It
was
was,
expected. It wasn't something that was okay. It wasn't something that I had to force myself or had to make sure that family make sure I go. It was just something that was like expected in my family.
yeah, me too. It's just
Yeah,
you believed in God and you were going to university.
yeah.
um, why did you pick those majors in university? What got you interested in conservation as a girl?
As a girl, when I was in high school, okay, to start off, I didn't want to do this when I was growing up. When I was younger, I wanted to be a cardiologist, but things changed along the way, and then you go to high school, and then some subjects are tough on you. And at some point, I realized I really like working with the environment because growing up, we used to watch a lot of documentaries, animal documentaries. So in the end, all I wanted to do while I finished high school was work with animals or work within the environment. So in Kenya, there are few courses you can actually do that are geared towards that. There's environmental science, environmental management, wildlife. Or you can be a veterinary science and focus, when you're done with your studies, focus on animals. So I had the option of doing veterinary sciences, wildlife management, and environmental sciences. I liked animals more, so I chose wildlife management because veterinary sciences was a bit way too much in terms of the cost for doing the course. So I decided to do wildlife management instead.
Mm-hmm.
And because I have a passion for the environment and mostly wild animals. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you were in high school, were the class sizes like 50, 60 students? And if so, has that changed so that class sizes are smaller?
Um, when I was in high school, we were about 15 class, if I'm not wrong, about 40 to 50. So at this particular moment, it's been almost 10 years since I finished high school. And a lot has happened in terms of education in Kenya, high school, primary, university. And there are many schools that may have more than 100 people in a class, and some may have few. So I guess at this particular moment, it depends. And for me, I did my studies in a school in Maasai land, which mostly does not take girls in, but and the school didn't have mostly Maasai uh, women in the classes. Mostly it's a national school, so it had a cross boundary of all the tribes in Kenya. I'd say maybe it's still the same, depending on if classes have been built. It just depends with where the school is and where how the school is clustered in the high school system, whether it's a national school or a provincial school or a district high school. Yeah.
How right now? How many years are students required to go to school? To what grade level?
In high school or
Or what?
in
I grade 8, grade 12. What's the law?
the system has actually changed. So currently there is grades from grade 1 to I think grade 3, and then there is class 1, class 4. The systems have actually changed currently. So I'm really not sure how to actually explain it. But now we have a new system called the curricular based, which is focused on more skill based. So yeah, I think that's about
Well,
my knowledge on.
my question is, do most Kenyan teenagers go to high school, or is it still you have to take exams, and if you don't pass the exams, you don't get in, and that kind of limitation?
There is that limitation. I don't think many people, the threshold from primary school to secondary school is a bit low. So you can find many students in primary school will not get to secondary school and still will not get to the university or tertiary level of education. So as the education level goes higher, the number of students also decreases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens to those students who don't have a high school education? Are they mostly rural, and they work in farming and agriculture?
Yeah, true. They can be rural. They can also be urban. And when they finish their let's say primary school level, they just find something else to do, like farming, working in industries and such like things, construction, such like things. Yeah.
Mm. Um, in the before colonialism, tribes like Kikuyu had really strong social supports, and age groups worked together, and there were rituals to help young people grow up. And then when the missionaries, colonialists came, they disrupted all that. So I wondered, what's the legacy of like being a Kikuyu? What does that mean today? What kind of social support or influence is there?
Um, I'd say sometimes being a Kikuyu, your name betrays you, and people see that you're privileged enough, and you can access things easily more than other tribes. But for me, I don't like to think it like that because I'm not purely Kikuyu. So I always like to say I'm Kenyan,
Mm.
regardless of regardless of anything, because in the end, we are one country, we are one people, and these things always come up during elections or when something happens in media that is very tribal. So it's something that happens, and it's always best to just keep yourself out of it. Otherwise, you cannot define yourself by your tribe.
Mm.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
have most of the leaders been Kikuyu since Kenyatta?
Mm, I'd say yes and no. It just depends. Yeah.
Mm. Um, in terms of your activism now, what are you finding are effective tactics? What are your goals in the organizations that you work with and your social media work? What are you trying to make happen, and what tactics make it happen?
Um, my main goal is to make sure people are informed, because if not, people are not. You cannot take care of something you don't know about. So even if it's that one tree, why my goal is to make sure or to educate someone that that one tree is important for them, and or that one animal or that one insect. So my main goal is mainly to educate people through all my platforms, social media. I also run a blog where I make it a point to just educate people on it. And I'm also the co-founder of an organization that brings in young environmental people to discuss about conservation, environmental activism, climate change. Yeah.
And what is that blog called? What's its name?
My blog is called nikasilica.org. Yeah.
And how does that translate?
It's Swahili meaning wild instincts in English.
Mm. And so, how do you reach rural young people who don't have access to internet and blogs and social media?
Mm. Um, for me, my current focus is on the urban people since I grew up in Nairobi, which is an urban area. That's my number one focus. But anytime I get the opportunity to go to a school in a rural area, I'll take that opportunity and go educate the children or the community on the environmental matters. So with the organizations I work with, I'm able to actually do that on a community level, on a rural level.
And what just lecturing to people and giving them facts, they kind of tune out after 5 minutes or something. So what approaches do you use to educate people who don't have access to films and cartoons and whatever?
I'd say storytelling, like making a story out of it. Don't you know? In one sense, is people don't like to be told about facts, but they will listen more when it's a story. So even if it's a tree, you can have a story about it. You can have a story about a rhino. You can always have a story about any single animal, any single plant life, any single, even if it's about climate change. You can bring it up in the sense of what they see now and what they used to see a time like this last year or 2 years ago, like a time like this last year. So getting into their mindset and letting them tell the story themselves makes it more interesting than I going to them and bombarding them with facts. So storytelling.
Could you give us an example of a story that you heard or that you told? What's a story that we could hear?
Um, my story basically would be on climate change, like um, showing people or reminding people how the climate has changed throughout the years from how from the weather patterns we are currently experiencing. So when you tell someone how they saw the environment a time like this last year, whether it was raining or it was not supposed to rain. Like this particular time, it's March, it's actually April, and it's supposed to be the long rains. We haven't experienced that in a really long time if I was to compare it with, let's say, when I was 10. So when you bring it to that perspective and then you remind people where they've come from and how the environment was and how places they used to go had trees, or when you're in a rural area and then you see trees and then now you don't see them anymore, and how you feel now when there are less trees, when there are less animals, when we are so focused about our busy lives and forgetting our natural environment. So such like a story. My storytelling is mostly geared to, I like when people tell their stories. People have so many stories and I like to hear their stories and engaging with them in the conversation. Yeah.
Is drought the main climate change that's hurt Kenyans, or what is the main effect of climate change and global warming?
Mm, I'd say drought. Currently, there is a locust invasion, which is it has a long story to it, but mostly drought in many areas, which makes it hard for even farmers to plan on how they're going to plant this season. So mostly, yeah.
And drought also means that women have and girls have to walk further to get water from the boreholes, right? So
Mm-hmm,
then you can't go to school if you have to spend 2 hours a day or whatever it is walking to carry
mm-hmm,
water in jerry cans.
yeah.
Is there an effort to have more accessible water sources? I mean, is that possible with like solar wells or something like that?
It's very possible with wells, but that's actually a government initiative, but also a personal initiative. So there are many organizations who actually come up with such initiatives in these areas. I'd say mostly there's a possibility you can dig a well and get water. But what if you dig a well and just get sand? So I'd say that can be linked to also tree growing initiatives, because when you plant trees, they become sponges and they store water. So when the two are linked, because we can decide to dig dams or dig boreholes and there's no water or the water is not sustainable. So I'd say a more sustainable approach will be growing trees. Yeah, especially indigenous trees, because even indigenous trees, when they're so young, at least they can hold enough water and
Mm,
they can also mitigate drought.
mm.
Yeah.
Your Nobel Prize winner set up a organization to plant trees, and that I'm sure that's still active.
Yeah, it is very active. The Green Belt movement is very active.
That's wonderful.
And yeah, it has mentored so many young women currently through the Wangari Maathai scholarships. So also many young people have been mentored through the Green Belt movement, which is helping to restore ecosystems in the country through tree growing, sustainable farming. Yeah.
You mentioned that you have a organization to help train and educate young environmentalists. Do they come from all over Kenya, and is it mostly virtual, or do they come to conferences and get education, or how does it work?
We actually started it last year, so it's very young currently. But the main aim is to share stories, share conservation stories of young people like me who are already working in the conservation field and who are already setting up their own initiatives to make conservation a more everyone can do it and not just one person can do it or not just a foreign person can come and do it but I as an African can do it. So the main target group is mostly universities, going to universities, training them on the opportunities that are out there, showing them that they don't have to be employed to work in conservation, that they can start their own initiatives such as growing their own trees, going to schools and teaching them about conservation. Currently, we are doing virtual meetings because of the corona pandemic. So we are doing a lot of virtual online meetings. So where we get a speaker and then the speaker comes and becomes like the focus point in that particular setting. Yeah.
So cute. Roughly, what percentage of the youth that you work with in conservation are female?
Mm, roughly a percentage, I'd say. I'm not really sure, but it's not more as I expected. Although I know a lot of female people working in the conservation field, but I'd say it's not that much. I'd say I'd give it 35.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's interesting because around the world, every organization that I talk with that's led by young people, it's 60-70% young
mhm.
women that are involved. Do you
I
think?
guess in an organization, it depends with the organization. But the people I know who are in conservation, who be around the same age bracket, I'd say there are more men than women. But there are women who can actually there and are interested in it. So I think it's growing the number of females to act and not just wait. Yeah.
Do you think of yourself as a feminist?
Yeah.
And what is it? What is? How do you define that?
For me, feminism is all about equal opportunities, like making me feel not uh, not because of my gender, but as a human being that I have this opportunity and I can do it also as a human being, not because I am female, not because I am male. So just equal opportunity for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, in the West, there's a growing percentage of adolescents, especially girls, who are anxious and depressed. And they feel a lot of pressures on them. And I wonder if you see that in your social sphere or not.
Anxiety and depression. Yeah, because sometimes a lot of things happen in terms of the environment. One day we are growing trees, the next day an expressway wants to be built near a green space. So it brings a lot of anxiety about the future and a lot of what can I do to make the situation better, and sometimes wondering how you can churn in your inner Wangari Maathai to fight for all the resources and to because she was an inspiration. So looking into her to fight because she was also female, and so looking at what she did, and even if you have anxiety, even if you have depression about um, the future in terms of green spaces and our environment, just going out there and doing it even if no one will listen to you, but knowing it's the right thing to do for future generations and not just for you.
Do you think that the pandemic is in any way connected with climate change? Like we've encroached on the wild animals, so there's more influence, so they can spread disease. I don't know. Will this be a teaching tool for environmentalists?
Definitely it will be a teaching tool, considering the more we encroach into wild animal species, the more we come into contact with these animals, the more any diseases they might have will be easily transferred to us, whether we like it or whether we don't like it. So this will be hopefully a topic of discussion and change perspectives once it's all over and become, if we can actually focus on the pandemic this much, it shows that governments can actually focus on climate change. So I hope it's a turning point for anything, not even just for climate change, for things like access to education, access to water, access to equal opportunity for everyone. It should be a turning point. The way governments have come up and done what they've done, it should actually be a turning point. Yeah.
Mm. And then the other part of the pandemic is that pollution is much better around the world. They have pictures of Chinese cities that were always just smog, 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 and now they're open and people can breathe fresh air. So it's been really good for the earth in terms of pollution.
Yeah, that's true.
What about the status of wildlife? I think people understand that we need wildlife to bring in tourists. So if only for economic reasons, we should um, protect them. But the picture that I have is of poaching and encroachment on their land and eating bushmeat and all of this. So what's the current status of the the wonderful wildlife that we think of as on the Serengeti Plain and places like that?
Um, that depends can depend on a specific species or can depend on what is actually ongoing. A recent study showed that the black rhino population increased. That's a good thing.
Why
Yes.
why is that? What's changed?
What's changed is more people on the ground protecting the species, and still the main challenge remains the rhino horn being used as a medicine, yet it is not medicine by people in China and Vietnam. So that's still work to do. If we crack that, then that will be good. But I'd say poaching has reduced in terms of the black rhinos population. That is why the increase happened. Um, but there are some challenges that are still faced in Africa in general, especially areas that have elephants and lions and other carnivores, such as human wildlife conflict. As populations continue to grow, we still encroach on the wild habitats, and more conflicts continue to happen. And sometimes you see retaliation. So what is happening now is many organizations are working with communities to prevent retaliation of a species. And even if they see this species as damaging, that will come and kill their family or kill their livestock or kill their livelihood, just educating them on why this species is important, not just for tourism, but also as in the ecological effect of balancing our ecosystem. So, and also coming up with innovations that can prevent such damages from happening and such conflicts from happening. So, I'd say it's a work in progress. Even if sometimes you go one step ahead and then you go two steps back, you still come back with that. You still make sure that human wildlife conflict is not seen in the community, like we are coming to make sure that we don't kill the animals for us, but for them as well. That this animal is important to them also, and not just the economy of the country.
If elephants are encroaching on my crops, what can I do about it? I mean, I don't think, can you put up big fences, or elephants don't care about fences?
Currently, there are so many ongoing initiatives on that to protect communities from elephants, although it still happens when an elephant comes to a farm. The one thing the farmer is supposed to do is go report to the Kenya Wildlife Service, which is mandated to protect all wildlife in the country. So I'd say there are so many innovations, and people are working towards mitigating human-wildlife conflicts on very frequently, so that we can reduce it. But the number one advantage is educating children, because when you educate children, then they see this elephant has destroyed my dad's farm since I was growing up. What can I do to make sure this does not continue to happen? What can I do to make it easier for my family and even myself when I grow up? So I'd say educating children is something that can actually grow, and if we educate more children, even if they become doctors, they will see that there's an elephant and it needs to be protected. Yeah.
Interesting. Around the world, climate activists sometimes generate trolls online, and negative comments and insults. I wonder if you've experienced backlash, or that's not an issue.
I'd say backlash I've currently not experienced, or if I've experienced, sorry, if I've experienced, it's not something that actually disturbed me. Yeah.
Good.
Oh my God.
Roughly, how much time do you spend a week on environmental causes? And then the second question is, how do you nurture yourself and prevent yourself from burning out?
I'd say every day I work on environmental issues. Okay. Just hold on a minute. I'd say I work on environmental issues every single day, from Mondays. Oh God. From Mondays, it's just gone off.
And then how do you keep yourself renewed and full of energy?
Okay, this is going to be a weird YouTube video.
No, it's good. It's human.
Please sit down. Enjoy it. Oh my God. Please sit down. Please, please, please.
Do you have a toy you can give him? A toy?
That's what gets him. Who gets something? All of them are not near me right at this particular moment. What do you want?
What a beautiful child. So the question was, how do you keep yourself full of energy when you're working so hard and it's such a huge problem that we're facing?
Most times I tune myself with nature, so I hike a lot. I love hiking, and that's one of the things I purpose to do most times. before this pandemic, but yes, I do a lot of hiking and reading as well,
Mm-hmm.
and meditate.
What international groups of climate activists do you follow and look to? Are you inspired by any groups in other countries?
Um, Other countries, I'd say the Fridays for Future movement was really revolutionary. Um, Greenpeace, what Greenpeace does, even here in Kenya, but also internationally, what they do is really something that you actually see that there's a lot of optimism going on around, and it doesn't discourage you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And are there students who are striking, doing school strikes on Fridays in Nairobi?
Yeah, they're actually students and even people who are just taking their own personal initiative to educate people on the environment on Fridays.
Mm-hmm. And of those school strikers, the Fridays for Future, roughly what percent are girls?
Hmm, I'd say most of them are actually girls. Most of them, the ones I've seen, most of them are actually girls.
And they stand on the street and have posters and flyers and talk to people. Is that what they do?
Yeah, but they're actually few. They're not really many as you'd see in other countries, but they're there, but not as many because I think it's the trajectory of events on how climate change is affecting African nations or the developing world more than developed nations. So I'd say some countries may have more people depending on their level of what they have. Are their basic needs being achieved? It's something that's rare in developing countries. If I have to skip school to go stand somewhere and educate people on the environment, but yet when I go home I don't have food, it becomes an issue. So I'd say it just depends on our level. The people who are striking may not necessarily struggle with their basic needs. So you'd not expect many people in Africa to actually be on the Fridays for Futures movement because we also have issues with human wildlife conflict. So that will also become an issue. We also have an issue with deforestation. So I think for me, the Fridays for Future in Kenya could be more based on deforestation and human wildlife conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are there pan-African, sub-Saharan African groups that are young people working on climate?
Yes, there are.
What groups are
There, there,
those?
there's Youth for Nature. There are actually a ton.
Mm.
I can't actually come with them at the top of my mind right now.
Well, maybe you can send me the list and I'll put it on the YouTube description.
Okay.
Um, so, what do you see yourself doing 5 years from now?
5 years from now, I see myself having mentored many young people to be involved in environmental conservation. Um, I just see a lot of growth happening in the next 5 years, not to pinpoint exactly what it will be, but I just see a lot of growth in every aspect that I'm doing to work in the environment, whether it's communicating, whether it's mentoring, or whether it's growing the organization that I've co-founded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And overall, would you say you're optimistic or pessimistic about our ability to turn around climate change, global warming, pollution?
I'd say I'm very optimistic. as I said earlier, I'm a very optimistic person. So for me, it's I range my successes in not how many people I've reached, but how I've reached one person who was able to help another person who was able to help another person, and that group, like it was just me educating one person, which eventually grew into from one small drop of water to a whole bucket, to a whole swimming pool, to a whole ocean. So I'm still pissed about it.
I like that image a lot. Is there anything else that you think we should include about how to be an effective organizer, how to turn around climate change, destruction of the environment, the wildlife that we haven't talked about?
I'd say being persistent with anything that you do, and uh, because at this particular sorry at this particular moment you can meet someone and tell them about climate change, tell them about global warming, tell them about issues facing wildlife and communities, but they do not understand. Being persistent with them, following up, not wondering why they're not understanding, just being patient and persistent with people is what I can say, and also being persistent with government, with businesses, and telling them the importance or showing them the importance of our environment, of our wildlife, of nature in itself. So I'd say being persistent and following your instincts. Yes.
What's your government's policy? I think they recently said no more plastic bags because
Yeah, we don't have. mm,
so
Yeah,
what go ahead.
plastic bags were banned, which was a great initiative by the government, which has actually been like like a butterfly effect to other countries, to other cities. So I'd say currently with these plans to ban single-use plastics in protected areas, that is national parks, forest areas. So if that goes through, that will also be a great thing for the country. Yeah.
That's like plastic water bottles.
Plastic water bottles, plastic cups, plastic spoons and forks and all the cutlery, plastic plates, even plastic, like when you go to a supermarket and then you get a bag of chips with a plastic bag, that's also something that's it's not going to be allowed in the park. So when you go to the park, you go with your own lunchbox packed with anything you want to eat, but no any plastic, single-use plastic that will be left in the park.
So the government acknowledges that it's a problem.
Yes, it does.
That's a step forward, unlike Brazil or the US or other backward leaders who say, oh, climate change is a hoax, like Trump said.
Uh, uh, yeah.
Good. All right. Well, thank you.